Two friends meet up to drink some beers and talk about past times. Not yesterday, but long ago, it's scandals, wars and crimes. From Stalin's reign to Prohibition, Tudors, Pompey, Bush and NASA's mission, Edison's bulk, Genghis Khan's rise to victory. Forget your old teacher, it's time for Pint-Sized History.
Hi, I'm Zack.
And I'm Joe.
Welcome to Pint-Sized History. Joe's the teacher. I'm the student today. What are we looking at?
Yeah, it's me, and we did mention it very briefly at the end of the last episode with Johnny, who we should mention before we get into this.
What a guy.
I mean, how good was that podcast? Just listening to his stories and stuff. I couldn't believe how lucky we got to be able to chat to him and him be so in-depth with it all. I thought it was brilliant.
Because obviously I know him from the show, so like I have this perception of him, and then it kind of unlayered itself a bit over the show, and then after the show getting to know him more, and then like that deep dive into his life was just it was really, really fucking powerful for me. I felt like when I listened to it back on you whenever you get your podcast from, when I listened to it back, I just felt like kind of almost wanting to cry at points of it, and like this is a whole new side of him. Again, another new side of the man that I once thought I knew, who I once thought, and now I know again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised because like it was that powerful for you, because for me it felt extremely powerful to listen to it.
This podcast where we learn about all the events that happened in the past that shaped the world we lived in today, over a couple of refreshing beverages.
Yeah. What are you drinking today?
I'm drinking a Beavertown Neck Oil. It's a session IPA. Last week I came a bit with the pink, and it was a bit much. It was like when you're a new footballer at a club, you turn up with like the bright orange boots, and you think you got like a point to prove. And really, it just it was good. It was nice. It was a good drink. But this one is just a normal IPA, a session IPA. Drink fresh, still cool and upright.
Beautiful. Well, I went for a Corona, as the topic that we'll be talking about today is in a country that isn't Mexico, but it's nearby. And so I thought if there's any beer that kind of is in that region, then it would be a Corona. What we're talking about today is the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Cuban Missile Crisis is this event that happens in 1962 over a few-week period. It is quite clear that was, with almost no doubt, the closest that humanity has ever been to annihilating itself off the planet. There's the debate about if that's even possible, if you could kill humanity through a nuclear war, a nuclear armageddon. We're going to talk about that as well. But the reality is that was the closest the world ever came to pressing the button. What it was, essentially, was this standoff between the USA and the Soviet Union.
Always those two.
The reason I want to do this podcast, and this is the second one I'm researching, and I could have chosen anything. It's so scary what could have happened and can still happen any day, just by complete chance. And I feel like more of a light needs to be shone on exactly how that could go down.
It's funny you mentioned shining a light on the bit of history, because I've spoken to my partner about it, and like some of my friends and other people I know, and they really don't know anything about it. And I agree with you. It's a fundamentally important moment in human history.
Humanity has never, until the last 70 years, had the chance to wipe itself out. And suddenly that power is given to them. For the first time in history, we had two superpowers, the Soviet Union and the United States, that had ideological differences between the two. You know, there's kings and queens and religions that have fought, but never ideologies. And this was capitalism versus communism, knuckled down to a few severe flashpoints. You know, when this is superpowers that have weapons that can destroy everyone, it gets pushed down into these moments in history. So the Americans figured out that they could create this device called a nuclear weapon. They pushed hard through Oppenheimer and all those lot to build the first nuclear weapon, and they did in 1945. What happened next?
Oh, well, we dropped it. Well, not we. The Americans did. Dropped it on the Japanese at Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
That's right.
Fat man and little boy?
Correct. By the 1960s, hydrogen bombs had become a thing.
Oh, yeah.
And hydrogen bombs basically had about 1,000 times the capacity of annihilation that atomic bombs had. So by the time of the 1960s and the time of this story that we're going to talk about, nuclear weapons are 1,000 times more destructive and more dangerous than they are in the two nuclear bombs that fell on Japan. The power that you can create and the destruction you can create, it was growing at such an exponential rate that it was so scary, because you think, where's this going to end and how is it going to end? And that question still remains. It's kind of difficult to explain exactly what a nuclear war or a nuclear Armageddon would look like, because it's never happened.
Play Fallout.
You could play the Fallout game, sure, but that's, you know, a bit of make-believe, a bit of science fiction, a bit of this and a bit of that. It's not actually what would happen. It's just one artistic interpretation of it. But the reality is, frankly, terrifying. Now, the total number of nukes in the world today is 12,000. At the height of the Cold War, in terms of their building of nukes, was 1985, where there were 63,000.
Jesus.
When a nuke goes off, usually say in a city centre or a, you know, somewhere, a population centre, the immediate area around it is completely pulverised, completely burned to nothing, just gone, everything gone. If you're in that, you know, blast zone, you will just not be there. Like there's nothing will remain, literally nothing. So, you know, that's why those really horrible pictures you've seen of shadows.
They're stained against like the buildings.
Yeah. Once that is done, once that big blast is done, it creates a firestorm in the aftermath. Now, the mushroom cloud is the famous image of a nuclear weapon, but it's not actually where the danger is. Now, it's the iconic image, but the cloud after that is actually the thing that's extremely dangerous.
Because that carries all the radioactive fallout?
Not the radioactive fallout, although I'm sure that's probably part of it as well. What it carries is all the soot, all the aerosol, all the dirt from that firestorm and carries it up into the air. And what happens with that is that it goes past the cloud line. There's no more clouds that can rain on it. Nothing like that is possible anymore. It goes so high up, you know, dwarfs the hydrogen bomb mushroom cloud. It goes so much higher. And then when there's no atmosphere where it stays, in like the outer bit of the Earth's atmosphere, there's nothing to get rid of it. So it essentially just lingers. And what would happen with one bomb is that it would linger in this isolated area and it would eventually just go away. But if you were to do hundreds of them, or thousands, or as I said earlier, 63,000 in 1985, then that would essentially cover the entire northern hemisphere and the majority of the globe in general in a cloud of soot and dirt and ash, and the sun would no longer be able to reach the Earth.
Really?
What? Yes.
Ooh, Ice Age.
Now, well, it wouldn't be as bad as an ice age because essentially this wouldn't last forever. Ideally, it would probably go within about 10 years. That's a rough guess. It depends on what it is, but
a quickie.
A decade, yeah.
Quickie, the Ice Age.
That's the reason why they call it a nuclear winter, because suddenly the summers are small and they're colder and they're drier. The winters are far longer and last for most of the year. Some parts of the world will become, you know, what's the word? Uninhabitable. It will cease to be livable, most of the planet, and the places that do have the food, that do have the ability to have crops. Because look, think of it this way: if there's drier summers and less summer and warmth in general, then that means drought. And if there's more drought in general, then that means no crops. And if there's no crops, that means famine. And so the vast majority of the northern hemisphere, especially, would be dead.
Eating baked beans.
Tiny. I mean, they wouldn't find baked beans to begin with. There'd be nothing.
I feel like this is kind of like teaching me how little I actually knew about nuclear Armageddon. You ever see the website where it tells you how far you have to be away from a bomb to survive it? And then you think like, okay, I'm in Hertfordshire. Like if it hit central London, I'll be fine. But then you don't realise that you essentially have really long winters. You're going to freeze to death shortly after. Don't worry about the bomb because 5 years later you'll have no food.
Yeah.
Those haunting.
Those choices wouldn't even be ready for you because we are both Londoners. Now, if a nuclear war were to happen, London is almost certainly one of the targets. So
why? What did we do?
So sadly for us and pretty much everyone we know, life would cease to exist. If we lived on the outskirts of London and we were lucky enough to avoid that fallout, but the nuclear war had happened, realistically, your chances of survival are less than 5%. Because the
skill issue.
The crops,
I've got it.
The food left in countries like the United Kingdom, Russia, the United States, China would just cease, and we'd be completely at the whim. It would be a hellscape, and I truly mean that. It would be awful. It's impossible to theorize exactly how many people would die because it really depends on just how many nukes were shot and how many firestorms were therefore created and built up in the world. But you can be rest assured that global trade would be gone. Some countries, you could argue, would just stop existing, or at least the point of them, they could be a new version of them founded somewhere else. But So a lot of these places would just go. There would be no trade. Would there be wars afterwards? The places that probably would survive a nuclear holocaust relatively well in comparison would be places like Chile, Argentina, New Zealand, Australia. If one of those places, because of the fact that all the major powers that have nukes and would use nukes are in the northern hemisphere, that's where the majority of the firestorm and the soot and ash above the atmosphere would stay, meaning that the winters would be harshest there. If you're in New Zealand, hopefully some of your livestock is still able to live in this new world, and you would be able to manage to keep your own population alive. But if there's some nation relatively close away, say like a Fiji, that is begging you for food because they have completely run out, are you going to give them any? At the sake of your own population?
You're really setting a horribly morbid scene for this episode, Joe. I thought Stalingrad was bad.
Well, doing my research for this, I realised just how intense this subject is.
Are you scared now at the thought of, like, because I think it's a bit like a pipe dream, nuclear war, but like, it's a nothing. Yeah, it's harmless. But I mean, after researching it, do you feel that way?
Let's get into the Cuban Missile Crisis, shall we? Because there's a lot more for me to tell you. My main point would just be, to end this talk about nuclear warfare, is that everyone just has to recognise that if something like this were to happen, the world would essentially reset. Everything would change forever. If you had a calendar, imagine populations in the future from now, if they had a calendar, it wouldn't be AD or BC for the birth of Jesus and all this. It would be born the day that nuke hit, that first nuke hit, post-bomb and pre-bomb. If two nations have nukes and hate each other and are ready to use them at any point, it would be called a sort of doctrine. Do you know what that doctrine is called? It's an acronym, and it's another way of saying it is crazy.
Crazy? Oh, FUBAR?
No.
Snafu?
Mad.
Mad?
MAD. You know what MAD is? Oh, you don't? Okay.
No.
I said that because I thought you know that for sure. I even wrote down, get Davies to explain mad doctrine.
I've seen it in Hearts of Iron, but I don't know what it actually is.
Okay.
But, like, this is fascinating. I feel like I'm really understanding how little I knew about the Cuban Missile Crisis. So, tell me, Joe. I'm all ears.
MAD stands for Mutually Assured Destruction. And you do.
Don't know that.
Oh, you don't?
I'm gonna try and
I thought you did.
posture here and be like, yeah, I do. I didn't know.
Oh, okay.
It makes sense.
Mutually assured destruction. It's essentially the doctrine, the war strategy that if you threaten that you could use nukes at any point, then your enemy won't attack you, and that works the other way around.
So I did know this. I didn't know the name of the doctrine, but yeah.
Yeah, you understand.
God, I'm gonna lie, I'm such an amateur on my own history podcast.
They both are aware that they have nukes, and they're both aware that they could both use them. And so in the process, the war doesn't become about the Soviets and the Americans so much, because they know that if they attack each other, that would probably start a complete annihilation of humanity.
The Cold War.
This is the Cold War that we're talking about. The Cold War between the Soviets and NATO, which is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is basically just the USA and a lot of countries from Europe and Canada. In 1961... the USA had about 20,000 nuclear weapons, and it's at that time that John F. Kennedy takes charge of the United States. Are you ready for your first character of this story?
Ich bin ein Berliner. It's me, JFK.
Nice. Nice. You know what my mum said? She's like, you guys should stop with the accents. And I was like...
I just sound like Mayor Quimby from The Simpsons.
John Fitzgerald Kennedy was born in Massachusetts in 1917. He was the second youngest US president when he was elected, after Theodore Roosevelt, and was the youngest when his term ended. You can figure out why that is. He was 45 years old when the Cuban Missile Crisis happened. The USA, throughout Eisenhower's administration in the 50s, Eisenhower was the president in the 50s of the United States, had been focused further and further on defense spending. And many high-ranking officials from there were still around in the 60s when Kennedy took over, and they had been expecting to keep this young, exciting but naive in their mind president in the same, pushing towards more spending, more weapons,
hawkish,
more yes, exactly, more nukes, more aggression, essentially. Enter our second character, Nikita Khrushchev. Nikita was born in Kursk in 1894. He is 68 at the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis. He worked his way up the Soviet hierarchy until eventually becoming one of Stalin's closest advisors. When Stalin died, there was a power struggle, and Khrushchev took over from that. He started his process of de-Stalinization, which is essentially like telling the public that had been brainwashed into believing Stalin was God, that he wasn't God, and actually a bit of a maniac that killed millions of you.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a difficult pill to swallow. So he was, controversial in a sense for that. And that gave him less political power to make his own choices. And in the process, a lot of the people around him, similar to Kennedy, were military men that were scared of the US, terrified of the US, and therefore wanted to increase their own military spending and push for further aggression. Now, you can see immediately that these are now two parties that are already on a trajectory to clash, because both of them are spending more and more money to target each other, to focus on each other. President Kennedy, when he entered office, was told that if a nuclear war were to happen between the Soviets and the USA, it would likely kill a third of humanity, with most of the deaths being in North America, Europe, Russia, China.
Do you reckon the top Soviet generals and political officials made clear to Khrushchev the extent to which a nuclear holocaust might impact the world like they would JFK, like the opposite side would? Because I feel like there might be a little bit like, I don't know, there's sort of like an air of coyness about really being honest with the Soviet leader about what might happen.
Yes, I think that there are certain things in the Soviet leadership and the Communist Party that they would hide certain information because it's all just one big mess. However, with this specific issue, I think that he would know pretty much everything, because this is about as big as it gets. The Soviets, and I mentioned this actually a little bit in the Stalingrad episode, but one of the things about the Russians is that they feel like they are often the target, the people that people want to kill. They're going to be wiped out either by the Nazis or by some other population.
I love that monologue. It was a great one.
The rhetoric about the Soviets from the Americans was pretty damning. I mean, the 1950s, Eisenhower was like this terror to the Red Fear, the communists. Even communism is still being used as a threat in America today.
What was the guy's name?
You commie bastard. It's like an insult. And this is a thing. And it's like, this happened in the 50s and it continued in the 60s. And if you're the Soviets, then you would be terrified of it. And because you think that there's any chance this nation, which has the vast majority of the nuclear weaponry that could destroy your entire nation at their arsenal. The Americans are lucky because they're essentially flanked by two oceans, the Pacific and the Atlantic, just either side. They're safe. The Soviets don't have that. They've got Europe, Western Europe, pretty much on their doorstep. And one thing that they found really frustrating was that while they couldn't get nukes anywhere near the Americans could put all their missiles in Italy, Britain, because we had our own nukes at that point. We were one of the only other nations that did, and Turkey. The thing about nukes now is that they have a much wider range of where you can shoot them off to. But back in the 60s, the range was important. You couldn't reach big population centres in the majority of the world unless you had nukes relatively nearby. Turkey and Italy, which were the two places...
Could they reach Moscow?
Could reach most of the industrial Russia.
Wow.
And that was what the Soviets were so terrified of. When they learned that Turkey especially had suddenly these nukes in front of them, that now they're completely pressured, what do? Enter Cuba. Fidel Castro was born in a small village in East Cuba in 1926. He is 36 years old during the Cuban Missile Crisis. After studying law in Havana, he grew leftist and socialist views and vowed to rebel against the extreme right-wing government of Fulgencio Batista.
Fulgencio. I think it's Fulgens.
Batista. Fidel Castro, along with the famous Che Guevara, led a guerrilla war against Batista, and this culminated in the Cuban Revolution of 1959. Suddenly, there is a left-wing communist government with a hatred of American imperialism in charge of an island just below Florida. So the CIA are not happy with this. So what do they try to do?
Overthrow the government.
Yes, they did. And how did they do that?
With the Bay of Pigs invasion.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah.
Look at you.
Yeah, now the brain's are ticking.
Woo! They actually do a few things. They try to assassinate Castro several times. I think the official number was like 9. They decide to start the Bay of Pigs invasion, which is exactly what you mentioned, in an attempt to overthrow the government and implement a new democracy. as it were. They assumed that the poor people of Cuba would rise up against their tyrannical dictatorship.
Oh, yeah.
In reality, Fidel Castro had done excellently well. Like, they were very happy with him. Or the majority of the country were very happy with how the country was running better, everything was working better, and they didn't share any love for the Americans.
I think the area which the US targeted in their intelligence for the Bear Pigs landings was an area that Fidel Castro had particularly improved with his reforms.
That's right.
So like their intel was just shit from the start.
That's right.
So the Bear Pigs invasion failed.
You're absolutely right. The Bay of Pigs invasion is essentially one of the biggest fuck-ups that this... As I say fuck-ups, one of the biggest... He just opened his beer as I've said that. One of the biggest fuck-ups in American, foreign policy history. It's awful. It's so bad. It's like they make every choice, and they do all this, by the way, without consulting the main people. They try to keep Kennedy and all these people away from this stuff so they can protect them. But in reality, they're also not getting the full picture. So they go with these awful ideas, awful interpretations to essentially try to end these struggles on their own. And it fucks up so massively beyond belief that Fidel Castro, who already hates America, has now just seen his country try to be taken over from America. And then there's Khrushchev who goes, Hey,
we told you. Told you.
We're communists as well. You're communists. We've got an idea for you. Obviously, the Russians, the Soviets have got their own ideas and what they really want. What they say to Fidel Castro is, you could be invaded again. They're not going to stop. They're the Americans. They will kill you. If we leave nuclear weapons on your island, then suddenly there's a deterrent and they can't invade you. And Fidel Castro is actually like, I don't really like the sounds of that, but the people all around him were like, do it. This is a great idea. Do it. We need a big superpower backing us. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So once again, that's the third time now that a man is unsure about what to do, and all the noise around him is pushing him to an escalation idea.
Castro didn't want Soviet intervention on Cuba, but the people around him were like, we definitely want that.
Really, really unsure about it.
Really?
He was thinking this could go horribly wrong. I don't know if I want to be this now puppet of the Soviet Union. I'm not sure if that's the route I want to take it. But the people around him said, do it. And like I say, this is a huge thing that's a recurring theme in this is how dangerous things can happen when there's people that are in charge and the people around them are giving them, aggressive tendencies. And it truly shows just how dangerous things can get. And we've genuinely just scratched the surface of how deep this goes. So he says yes. And by May of 1961, in the middle of the night, suddenly a ton of trucks just start driving through all these little towns in Cuba, and all the population of Cuba are told to stay in their homes and not to go outside in the middle of the night. But they can peek out their windows and they can look and they can see that all these trucks are suddenly building something. It's literally like traffic jams of vehicles going through these tiny, like, imagine being in a remote
beep, beep,
town,
beep, beep.
and there's like suddenly there's like, hello, could you get out of the way, please? And there's like these, like, this could be really, you're like, what the fuck's going on? So the Americans obviously have spies everywhere. They have informants in Cuba. These informants immediately contact the CIA and say, hey, we don't know what's going on, but there's a lot of really strange activity happening in the middle of the night in like these western and northern villages and stuff. We don't know what it is. And they give that information over, and the CIA go, we should authorize a spy plane, a B-2 spy plane. So in May 1962, the missiles first arrive and they're set up. And in October 1962, they get this B-2 plane to fly over, and they see the images, and that's where it begins. Day one, Tuesday the 16th of October, 1962. President Kennedy was informed of the presence of nuclear weapons on America's doorstep, and he's shown the pictures taken by this B-2 reconnaissance mission. Kennedy holds a meeting with his National Security Council and key advisors. For the next 6 days, he discusses these issues in private, alone with just this group of people and a few advisors. They do not inform the American public. Be aware, this is complete shock to the Americans. They would never have realized and never have thought that the Soviets would put nuclear weapons so close to their own shoreline. They were not prepared for this in the slightest. So, they develop 6 possible courses of action. President Zack Kennedy, welcome, sir.
Thank you, Joe, for the invitation.
You can do the accent the entire time.
Yeah, why not?
We have 6 possible solutions for you, and we'd like to run them out for you. Okay? You ready?
Let me have it. Okay, I'll stop that.
Let me have it. The first option, A. Try to reason with or use pressure on the Soviet Union to remove the missiles.
Nah, fuck that.
Use democracy. B.
Diplomacy's got us this far.
Approach. I want you to take this seriously,
Okay,
by the way,
fine.
because the world is, on a knife's edge here, and you're saying fuck
Okay,
that.
okay.
Now,
No,
if
no.
Kennedy had said fuck that at that
I'm
moment,
sorry, I was joking.
If Kennedy had said that in that moment, then we wouldn't be here right now. Okay.
I'm so sorry. I take that seriously.
President
Talking
Zack.
is the best.
No. Just think through the options. President Zack, please. There's no time for tangents. We need to focus. A spy plane has been seen over Cuba, man. Wake up. Here we go. B. Approach Castro secretly and offer a new deal to be made with the Americans. Do away with the Soviets. Come work with us in some way. We can be friends. C. Send in the planes. Use our legendary US Air Force to attack all the missile sites and blow up all known missile
What happens
spots.
if you blow up a nuclear bomb? Does it have to be armed to have?
It could blow up for sure.
You think?
That's a good point to make because we are going to discuss these options. D. Blockade Cuba. Cut off any more missiles from arriving and wait it out. E. Full-scale invasion of Cuba. Overthrow Castro and remove the missiles by force. Or F. Do absolutely nothing and let the missiles stay there.
Ooh, okay. So I'm not going to let the missiles stay there. I'm not going to do nothing because, you get voted out in the next presidential election. The angry Americans, we do shit on the Americans a lot, but they are truly fucking hawkish bastards. They love a bit of war, and they won't want to sit back. They got those nukes in our door? That ain't right. So that leaves, which I think is what actually happened, a blockade. You can't invade a full-scale invasion because they could just fire the nukes. That's only going to escalate tensions, and you're going to end up killing a few Soviet soldiers, and that's going to, that's pretty close to nuclear Armageddon. I'll sweeten him up a little bit. If he doesn't want it, blockade. If we can't blockade, bomb the living hell out of it.
Sweeten up.
Yeah,
Castro.
sweet deal. Yeah.
Sweet. So your play
Mr.
would
Castro,
be to,
what do you like? A few cigars,
that's interesting that you say that. What do you think that the men around Kennedy wanted to do?
Bomb the runways, bomb the silos, bomb the missiles, invade the island.
Full scale invasion.
Oh yeah. Oh, you're telling me the Americans don't want to invade somewhere?
You're being serious because this is Do you genuinely think that's what they wanted to do?
I reckon some of the more nutty people around him were absolutely wanting that
because they would assume that this is the last straw, and that if they don't invade, then the Soviets are only going to push further. And
I guess also they don't want to look weak, so they want to show a force as well. Be like, we're not letting, we can't abide by this. We're getting rid of it.
Pretty much, yeah. The thing that's so horrific about this situation is the fact that the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which is essentially the highest leaders of the American military, all agreed on that first day. All agreed that a full-scale invasion was the only solution.
Jesus.
Every single one of USA's military leaders unanimously said, Mr. President, we think you should go in there. We should go in there and take over the entire country.
It's a big choice, isn't it? As a 45-year-old man to turn around to all these people who, a lot of them are probably, like I said, there for Eisenhower, which probably means they were there during World War II and the Korean War, and probably know what the best course of action is. Like a lot of them, like that, those good courses of action were taken in those wars. So, like, you're hearing this from respected, trusted advisors and generals. You're thinking, God, that's looking like the only solution. But well done, Mr. Kennedy, to keep your fucking head cool and level and not invade Cuba. Because there's only one way that's going, and that's poof.
I'm really glad you said that, because that is, for me, one of the main takeaways from this, is just how unbelievable it is that in that space, with so many voices all around you telling you to escalate further, which has been happening non-stop. That's the theme of this, that everyone's saying escalate, that you can ignore the people that, remember, these are older people, like you say, elders that have been in wars. You think they must know best, and yet you still, that gut feeling within you goes, surely this is wrong, surely this is a mistake. The reason that I picked this photo, now again, if you're an audio listener, then you can't see this photo, I'm sorry for that. But if you are a visual listener and you're watching on YouTube or whatever, then you'll see behind us we have a picture from the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is the war room, essentially, one of the rooms in the White House where they are discussing this period of time and what to do exactly. Most of the people in this room want a full-scale invasion, i.e. Escalating things further and hoping they can take control and somehow deal with the Soviet aftermath afterwards, not, fully considering how dangerous it could be if the Soviets then were to counteract themselves. Now, in this photo, there are a few very important people. We don't have time to go over all of them, sadly, but if you're looking at my camera, then you can see over here is President Kennedy. There is Robert McNamara, who is basically he's really important to the Vietnam War. He's one of his main advisors.
Is he Secretary of Defense something?
Yeah, Secretary. Yeah, I think so.
Defense Secretary?
Something like that. Over here is Lyndon B. Johnson, and when Kennedy dies, spoiler, a few years later, he is the vice president.
Kennedy dies?
I know.
How?
He's when? He's the vice president that takes over. And over here, in this corner of the room, is, in my opinion, the protagonist of this story. Enter Robert F. Kennedy.
Woo!
This is John F. Kennedy's younger brother. He's 7 years younger than his older brother, who's the president. He's one of the youngest members of the cabinet ever in US history. He's the Attorney General of the United States, taken there by his brother. He's 36 years old during the Cuban Missile Crisis. What he does over the course of this crisis is the world needed him. And I genuinely can't believe it. He ends up becoming the main person fighting the claim that this shouldn't be an escalation. We need to try everything we can to make sure that this doesn't escalate. And so in the process, over the next few days of talking, they're able to figure out, okay, let's start with a blockade, make sure no more missiles go there, and just figure out if we can posture the Soviets into relinquishing in some fashion. But the main thing is blockade, nothing else. In the meantime, everything is on high alert. So the American army is essentially prepped, ready in case they do need to invade. Amphibious landings are practiced. Planes are kept deployed, ready to go at a moment's notice. Men are informed that they could soon be invading a foreign nation.
Jeez.
Have you ever heard of DEFCON?
Yes. Defense considerations.
Close.
Conventions.
No.
Protocols.
It's defense readiness condition. It's essentially the preparedness that the US military is going to be at any one stage for its troops to do some sort of military exercise. 1 to 5, 5 being the least severe, 1 being nuclear war. Now, only at this point in American history, it had never gotten to DEFCON 2. That meant at a moment's notice, everything was ready to go. Safety buttons were off. So nukes, primed and ready. If you have a gun and you turn the safety off, that's dangerous. You want to keep that away from people. You want it ready. You're ready to fight. Nuclear weapons had the safety button off. Jet fighters had the safety buttons off, ready to fly at a moment's notice. Because if there's suddenly one more thing that happens and they need to get out there and fight, then they need to do it within minutes. Because if there's nuclear armageddon, then it's going to happen in about 10. That means that everything is just completely dangerous. And if you at one point just touch something and turn anything off, then suddenly everything can go to hell. And there are several moments over the next 2 weeks where that almost happens.
Really?
Yeah, which I'm going to
Someone just putting down their drink after having lunch. What a delicious bagel that was.
Mate, you joke, and yet it is genuinely that serious.
That's
I
insane.
can't believe, reading some of this stuff, how close it got. So Bobby Kennedy, under the mantle of his brother, goes and talks to the Russian ambassador. And the ambassador says, hey, these aren't aggressive nukes. These are just some stuff we're putting on Cuba. Don't worry, nothing aggressive, nothing everything's chill, man. But they know, well, that's bullshit, because they're nukes. Why would you place them there?
Why would they lie, Joe?
It's
What have they got to gain from lying, eh?
Everything is stress, pure stress, 24/7 for the cabinet and these people. On day 7, so this has been a full week, or almost a full week. This is now Monday, 22nd of October, 1962. Kennedy informs the American public of the build-up of missiles on Cuba in a speech in the White House.
Oh God, like a televised broadcast.
Yeah.
My fellow Americans.
Exactly
that sort of Jesus.
Exactly that. He announces that that they're blockading the area. They're not allowing any more missiles to enter Cuba, and they're going to wait it out, attempting to find a peaceful solution. But need I remind you, everything is on high alert. So now we enter day 10. On Thursday, the 25th of October, 1962, during the night, a guard at Duluth Sector Detention Center, which is, I believe, in Massachusetts, saw a dark figure climbing the perimeter fence. He shot at it and raised the alarm, thinking that this was part of the wider Soviet attack. You have to realize everyone's on such high alert that they think at a moment's notice, Russian spies, could come over and try and take over their weaponry or anything. Intruder alarms ring out across the base. Nearby, someone flicks the wrong switch. Instead of the standard security warning, pilots hear the emergency siren telling them to scramble. Within minutes, they are in their fighter jets, ready to take to the sky with nuclear weapons. In their minds, at this moment, World War III has begun. Because they're, from their perspective, if there's no practice. There's no decoy things. If they are called through this siren, that means war. And so they are getting ready. So they go to their ships, they get in them, and they start taking off. The dark figure that was climbing the perimeter fence was in fact a bear. A black bear. But the fighter jets are unaware of the fact that it's a black bear. So they've been told there's no practice runs. It's DEFCON 2. If it was DEFCON 3, maybe they'd be like, hold on a minute, could it be a bear? No, it's DEFCON 2. Everything is on the money. This is it. So they board their planes going, here we go. We're at World War 3. They might not land in the same country that they've taken off from, because this country now might be pulverized. That is the level that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Luckily, the base commander of the area realizes very quickly what's happening, and they quickly intervened, with one officer driving a truck onto the runway and honking in front of the fighter jets, telling them to stop.
Gee.
And if you hadn't done that, then they would have gone off.
Bloody hell, Armani.
So that was day 10 of this craziness. Day 11, Friday the 26th of October 1962. Now bear in mind, it's not just the Americans that are freaking out. The Soviets are freaking out, and the Cubans are freaking out. The Cubans think that at any moment they're going to be invaded, and the Soviets are like, what are they going to do? Because if they do attack, then what are we going to do? Are we going to start attacking? Kennedy's number one worry was that they would say, well, you've invaded Cuba, we're invading West Berlin.
Not just West Berlin as well, West Germany.
Right, but the point is, West Berlin's taken over. That is World War III. There's no, the Americans are under strict. Yeah. We are defending Germany if that happens, and that would be what nuclear Armageddon. So that's the states that we're at. On the day 11, Friday the 26th, 1962, Fidel Castro, who was adamant that Cuba would be invaded very soon, sends a telegram to Khrushchev, calling for a preemptive nuclear strike on the United States.
I heard about this.
So, bear in mind now, this is day 11. We've had a week of the cabinet figuring out what to do, and now they've made their blockade, and everyone is on high alert. Imagine being like this for one day, this pressure, this high alert pressure. Now we're on day 11, and people are starting to twitch. This is what he says. From an analysis of the situation and the reports in our possession, I consider that the aggression is almost imminent within the next 24 to 72 hours. If the Americans invade Cuba, the Soviet Union must never allow the circumstances in which the imperialists could launch the first nuclear strike against it. Eliminate such danger forever through an act of clear legitimate defence, however harsh and terrible the solution may be. For there is no other option.
Khrushchev reads it like, fuck that.
Yeah,
I'm not doing that. What a crazy guy.
Exactly. But yeah, bang right though, because Khrushchev, like Kennedy, thankfully, is actually much more reserved and much more
what the fuck is this guy talking about?
So he's made best friends.
Bomb them first.
He's made best friends with Fidel Castro and gone like, hey, let's really work together. Let's put some nukes. And then he gets this like, oh fuck, I should not have worked with this guy.
This guy, he's truly crazy.
Jesus Christ. That was day 11, Friday the 26th October 1962, that Castro sent that telegram. In my opinion, day 12 is the most dangerous day in human history. Saturday the 27th of October 1962 is the day that, quite frankly, the world should have ended. So many different things happened that should have made nuclear war inevitable. Researching this stuff, I just couldn't believe how lucky humanity got. So let's start from the beginning. At around midday on Saturday the 27th of October 1962, a spy plane flying over Cuba is shot down by Soviet anti-aircraft guns. Rudolph Anderson Jr. is an American from South Carolina, and he'd been shot and killed by Soviet forces.
Oh, I guess they're not drones anymore, are they? They're like actually manned aircraft. There's a guy in them literally taking pictures.
Yeah.
From they have a camera.
Absolutely, yeah.
Automatically presses the button, but like it's not like drones these days where you send like a machine over that just takes it for you. There's a guy in there.
No, there's a guy in there. This is a manned aircraft with a person inside it, and for the first time in this conflict, in this crisis, the Soviets have killed an American.
Oh, he dies.
He hella dead, mate. He shot out the fucking sky over the Cuban airspace.
He hella dead.
Kennedy was told the news during another meeting with top officials on what to do a few hours later. It was mid-meeting, and General Maxwell Taylor announced the news to the room. So Kennedy doesn't have time to react to this in private. He's in the room with everyone here, including all these warmongering people, and they're told the news that an American has been shot down by the Soviets.
Oh god, like the hawkish generals gonna be like, "Oh my god, that's it. We gotta go."
Well,
it's on.
I hope they're a bit more composed than that. But yeah, I think they were like that because you know what's also incredible is that Kennedy had pledged days before that if an American was shot down, they would retaliate. So he'd even said it himself. And so the room hears
fucking
this news.
Spineless JFK.
The room
How
hears
could
this.
he?
They hear this information and they go on, say the order. You said you would. It's time. And Kennedy still goes,
"Oh, well, it's, I got tennis at 2. I don't know if I can get there right now."
I mean, yeah, he's just like, let's wait it out. He literally just says, I tell you what, if they kill another one, that's it. But let's give him another day. This attack on the American spy plane had not been authorized. And Khrushchev was furious that this had happened because he thought this is it. That's it. We've shot an American. That's it. World War III. We fucked it. Nuclear Armageddon. The world's fucked. A third of the world is going to die because of this one stupid ass commander who took it into his own hands, blow that plane up. And that was it. Luckily, Kennedy slowed.
Is that commander in a gulag now?
Well, that's something I couldn't find out.
You tried to.
You would obviously want
he's
to know
in a gulag. If you can't find out who he is, he's in a gulag.
That's exactly what I thought. There's no, we never find out who, which either means that it was either covered up.
He's gone.
Or when he went back to Russia, they killed him or sent him to a gulag.
He's in Siberia.
Do you know who Vasily Arkhipov is?
I know he is.
Yeah, I thought so.
I know who he is.
Well, then go on.
Arkhipov is he's the political advisor on board a Russian submarine, Soviet submarine. And this Soviet submarine was essentially attempting to bypass the blockade. I don't know if they were basically in the waters where the American ships were. And the American ships knew that there was a submarine down there. And they wanted this submarine to not pass the blockade. So they dropped... Because basically when you want to get a submarine up from underwater, you drop what's called a depth charge. Like it says, goes down deep and blows the submarine up and, everyone on board dies. It's pretty chaotic if you're stuck in a submarine and someone puts an explosion to you. So they put fake depth charges. And on this submarine, they think that they're launching actual depth charges. They think they're at war.
Oh, no, I'm going to help you with this story because you've pretty much got it all completely right. He's not actually the political man. He's just one of the officers. Okay. Another man's the political one. But you're right with almost everything else. I just want to say, to help you with this story, this submarine, as was the case for lots of submarines, has not had any contact. It's so far underwater. It's not had any contact with Moscow for days. And they haven't been able to, they've got so low down, they can't get radio signals or anything. So they have no idea what's happening. And if they are attacked by in some capacity, then they're going to assume that that's World War III.
And this submarine also is nuclear capable. I'm pretty sure. So on its own volition, independent of Moscow, which is the important thing here, can launch a ballistic strike against its targets in America. It's
actually a relatively small ballistic missile. It's not a nuke that could, say, blow up a city in the same way that other nukes could, because it's a small one on a submarine, but it could still do an incredible amount of damage, and it is still a nuclear weapon.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh, that's nice.
You know the story pretty much bang on.
I think at the head of every Russian submarine are 3 men: the political advisor, the commander of the submarine, and his right-hand man, basically. And they have to come to a unanimous decision to take the ballistic action as a retaliation.
All 3 captains have to agree.
They have to agree unanimously. Yeah. So what happens is, after they get fake depth charge, they go, that's it, we're at war, we've got to go, we've got to launch the ballistic missiles. So they convene the 3 of them, the political officer and the commander, I could have had the titles mixed up. They both want to launch the submarine. They're desperate to push the button. And Arkhipov, he says no. And he is this close to pushing the button. He is, if he just says yes, because they think they're about to die, if he just says yes, he's like, we can blow them up right now. If we're going to get blown up, we've got to retaliate. Then literally 6 billion people's lives, I think it's over 6 billion people, 6 billion people I depend on this man to say no in this conversation, and he doesn't.
Yeah, you've pretty much got all of that correct. What they decide to do is to, or at least the captain of the ship, the commander, and the political advisor both decide, let's aim our ballistic missile at the aircraft carrier. And that's what their intention is to do, is to literally fire a nuke onto an aircraft carrier. Now, if that does happen, you're absolutely right. If an aircraft carrier from the US is blown up by a nuke from the Soviets, then Kennedy, despite all his pushing back, there's no way he can't then say, all right, we've just got to do it. Vasily Arkhipov, who, by the way, is 36 years old, way younger than the other two in the room.
Another good 36-year-old.
That's the thing I was going to say. Fidel Castro, Bobby Kennedy, and Arkhipov are all 36.
Best buds.
I can't remember the chances, eh?
Put them in the room, they'll have a great time.
You know, imagine the conditions as well on a submarine that you haven't surfaced for ages. Submarines are pretty grim, tight spaces. Yelling, sweatiness, arguing, what should we do? And he decides to not agree with his two senior commanders, and they don't do it in the end.
Because he's young, obviously, he's going to be the junior, right?
Yes.
He's not going to be control of the whole submarine as a 36-year-old.
Well, of course, no, but I mean, like, you'd assume his two higher-ups, even though all three of them are officers, they would probably assume that he's just going to do whatever they say. Yeah. But in reality, he ends up standing on his own 2 feet and saying, no, I'm not going to do that. And we actually don't know this until 2002, when this information becomes public to everyone. This has been a secret for decades and decades and decades, and it only came out recently. And only now is he truly getting the credit that he deserves, because this one man, this 36-year-old Russian man, I think born near Moscow, he arguably makes one big decision that saves the world. Bear in mind, this is the same day that the spy plane was shot down. The same day.
They won't know that, though, will they? Be on a submarine?
Well, no, but my point about this Saturday being the Saturday that could have ended humanity, this happened, a spy plane shot down, and they decide not to retaliate. And at the same time, this one Russian officer decides not to start a war by pressing one button, when everyone's telling him that he should. It is so incredible how this comes down to a few men not listening to what everyone around them is telling them to do. Now, you think that's... I've got one more for you, because...
From the same day?
From the same day, because you'd think that would be enough, but it's not. This is another story that we didn't know about until much more recently. But there was another spy plane in Alaska that, because of the Aurora Borealis... How do you say it?
Aurora Borealis.
Fucking stuff.
I think.
So it's...
The lights. The nice lights.
It's in Alaska, and it accidentally strays 300 miles into Soviet airspace. They've been told, do not go anywhere fucking near that Soviet...
accidentally strayed 300 miles?
Well, because of the...
Oh no!
Yeah, but look...
It's taken us 5 hours going the wrong direction to get here, but we've made it.
Well, it's because of the big equipment that's gone wrong. But even if it's not accidental, it's certainly not been told. They've not been told to do it. This is someone acting on their own record. When that happens... MiG fighter jets, which are the Russian equivalent of fighter jets, they are sent out to intercept this spy plane, and at the same time, American fighter jets come in to intercept, and they are equipped with nuclear weapons on the fighter jets. Luckily, they get there first, turn them round, and head back to Alaskan airspace. Oh my God! All three of these things happen on the same day. All three of them. Now, Khrushchev believes this has gone too far at this point, as should anyone that's fucking sane. Should have realised that this has gone too far. And he desperately wants to try and find a solution to get out of this, but still save face for the Soviets. That night... The same
12th day?
Yes, this same day.
God
as all those different things happening...
I'll be exhausted by the end of it.
John F. Kennedy that night asks his brother Bobby to go talk again to the Russian ambassador. The Kennedys' new offer, which they have to hammer out, it's not like they just come to it straight away, but after hammering out this deal, essentially, over the course of the night, they agree in private, so no one here knows. None of these chiefs of staff know what they're actually talking about. It's just
Bobby JFK.
Kennedy, literally as his brother, fighting out this deal with the Soviet ambassador, who will then relay the information back to Khrushchev. They talk throughout the night, and they agree to not invade Cuba, and as well they agreed to take their missiles out of Turkey and Italy, like we mentioned earlier. Very important point of this is that the NATO has had missiles available to attack the Soviets this whole time, and they want that for themselves. That's why they put them on Cuba to begin with.
They say if you take missiles out of Cuba, we'll take... They want the missiles out of Cuba?
Yes.
So they say if you take the missiles out of Cuba, and we promise we'll never invade Cuba, we'll take them out of Turkey and Italy.
The Soviets get an extra part of the deal, because The Soviets not only wanted Cuba to stay a communist place, not be invaded. That's part of the reason why they put the nukes
They've
there.
won that.
But they also now have gotten their pie of not having nukes in Turkey and Italy that could attack Moscow. So they've gotten both. From the Americans' perspective, they are happy to do that and de-escalate everything. But neither side wants the Turkey stuff to be known. They want it just to be kept as this purely Cuba issue. But that's it. That's how this crisis comes to an end. This Cuban Missile Crisis, this stop of a nuclear armageddon, literally comes down to a younger brother of a president going to the Russian ambassador and hammering out a deal in the middle of the night and saying, "You have my word. I am an emissary for my brother. I speak for him and I speak for his actions. I give you my word that we will do this. Not today. We can't take nukes out of Turkey today or tomorrow. That's impossible. But we promise that it will happen down the line. But let's slow down everything." And they agree to it. So the 28th of October, at 9 a.m. in Eastern Time, American time, Khrushchev announced publicly on the radio to the world, so the Americans could hear it quickly, that they were retreating. 1 hour later, Kennedy hears the news, and the people in the room are like, "Well, we're just accepting this deal. What the hell? Like, Cuba's on our doorstep." And he's like, "Guys, do you realise how fucking close we just came to the world ending? And we can allow Cuba to stay for just a bit. This is easily the best deal we're going to get. I'm not having any arguments against it. I'm sorry." So immediately Kennedy just says, "We embrace it," and they release a statement saying, "An important and constructive contribution to peace," is what they say. So they get disassembled, all the missiles, and sent back to Russia. And by April 1963, all nuclear missiles in Italy and Turkey are removed by the Americans. Cuba felt betrayed by the Soviets after, which I know it's a way I do kind of get, because they essentially feel like they're this pawn in this much bigger game. And they vehemently distrust the Americans and any pledge that the Americans make. And at the same time, Khrushchev's made these deals with no consultation of Fidel Castro.
Yeah.
They, from their...
Why would you?
It was all behind their backs. They've been...
Blow them up.
They've been completely kept out of this. And Che Guevara said, he even stated that if the missiles had been under Cuban control, they would have been fired off. And that the cause of social liberation against global imperialist aggression would ultimately have been worth the possibility of millions of atomic war victims.
Yeah, they're nuts.
Essentially, Guevara basically said, to stop this imperialist American dogs from controlling the world, what's a few million deaths? What's a few billion deaths? It's worth it. That's essentially what he's saying. Is there ever a time that nuclear weapons can be justifiable? This is the problem with nukes, is that they're so final. They are an end to all ends. And so if they're used, the world that you are trying to build or trying to get, trying to get rid of the Soviets and have this world without the Soviets, it's not the world. It's not the world that you want. And so it's this incredibly bizarre concept that it's even gotten to this point. Part of the reason why America feared the Soviets, even though the Soviets never really showed much indication that they hated America and wanted to kill America. Stalin obviously didn't like America, but they never gave an indication that they wanted to wipe America off the map.
Because they probably didn't, really.
Well, they didn't. Of course they didn't. They were more scared than they were aggressive. They were terrified that the Americans would do the same to them. The problem was that the Americans had built this arms business. Arguably one of the biggest flaws of capitalism is that it can make really awful industries push harder and harder for their own reforms. And we see that to this present day. American arms and American warfare was so beneficial, financially great, jobs, building machines, manufacturing, there's so much money in war that it was essentially just pushed from lobbyists and everything to the point where this Red Scare that communists want to burn you down it was a fabrication. It was never really real, but it was built that way.
The Red Scare is fascinating. Like you get, I don't know how much our listeners will probably know about the Red Scare, but you have people like McCarthy, who is an American politician at the time, who was getting really popular on stoking American fears about communism infiltrating America.
This is in the 1950s, the Red Scare.
The Americans were terrified of communism, so were scared about American imperialism and capitalism, and you get these massive overreactions from both sides that all they can do is escalate until you get to a head and you get Cuban Missile Crisis, and only then does common sense emerge, and you get because I don't know if you're going to talk about it, but after the Cuban Missile Crisis, you get the nuclear hotline, which was the hotline between America. It was a phone that connected the Soviet Union, the Kremlin, Khrushchev's office to JFK in the White House.
Yeah.
And
It still exists to this day.
do you reckon they look back in the 1970s, 1960s and see what they did in the 1950s and how crazy everyone acted? I think, fuck me, things got a little bit intense there.
We can laugh all we want about brainwashed nations that believe that Stalin was a god, or that in North Korea that their leader is a god. But in reality, brainwashing happens everywhere. And the Americans truly believed in the 1950s that communism was this great evil that could completely wipe them off the map. In reality, that was purely stoked from nothing to want more jobs and more money to be built on these fabrications of this danger. And that is, to this day, still a thing where, socialism, that's what one of the interesting things in Europe, socialism is just like normal. It's like, it's considered left-wing, but it's not, we talk about it and we don't laugh at it. In America, socialism is a completely ridiculous concept, and it's an insult. Bernie Sanders, you socialist, that's the kind of levels and that's not. I'm not commenting on the politics of it. I'm just saying that is purely.
I think you are. I think you got something to say. Get off your chest, King.
I don't. Hey, I love you, America. But that's purely from the resin from this awful time period where they were truly meant to believe that this is how things have to be. But yeah, so that was it. That was the end. And when I wanted to research this subject, I really recognised just how close. That's the number one question I wanted to get across, was just how close have we been to nuclear Armageddon? And that is the most high profile, most famous incident, and it got as close as it could come. But it's not the only one. And I've got here a few more that I want to talk to you about before we wrap up. Before we get to those, I'm just going to quickly just explain what happened to the other characters of this story. Khrushchev was forced out of office. President John F. Kennedy, if you're not aware, he was assassinated on the 22nd of November 1963 in Dallas, Texas.
Didn't know that.
The saddest part, that my favourite character of this story is Bobby. In 1968, he would run to become the new Democratic nominee for the President of the United States. And may I say, he was incredibly popular. I mean, this guy, from everything I've read, he seems like a really impressive individual. But, he's also like imagine the Americans being so distraught over their young, exciting president dying, and suddenly their younger brother, who's just as exciting, is there around the corner saying, we can get back to what we just had. I promise you I will take us there. And then he's assassinated, shot at midnight on the 5th of June 1968, and he dies aged 42.
Fuck me.
The number one point of this was to talk about how close we've come to nuclear war. I mentioned 3 or 4 times in the Cuban Missile Crisis where we were one tiny step away, one plane flying off a runway, or one officer deciding not to press a button from nuclear Armageddon happening. How many times, the last 70 years, do you think that's happened, that we've become that close?
To nuclear Armageddon.
To it becoming inevitable that nuclear war happens.
I'm going to say 5 times.
The Cuban Missile Crisis, so those experiences, and then 4 more since then.
4 other experiences, yeah.
Okay, so the answer is over 20.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And no one seems to really grasp this. The world has become extremely close several times, and over the most mundane things as well. One of Jimmy Carter's military advisors gets a call from one of his lower subordinates, and the subordinate says to him, "Sir, we've got incoming missiles from the east. We can see them on the radar." So he said, "Figure out how many there is. Call me back in 5 minutes, and be certain that this is happening. Don't get, if you know 100% this is happening, then tell me. But if not, then tell me that you're not certain." 5 minutes pass by. He gets a call back, and the guy says, "We got it wrong. It wasn't 5. It was 500, and they are coming." So in the middle of the night, this advisor to Jimmy Carter goes, "Right, okay, I've got to call the president, and he's got a big decision to make." So he picks up the phone and is about to contact Jimmy Carter when that same operator, subordinate, calls back and says, "It was a mishap, computer mishap, just a mistake. Everything's okay. It was just an error on the system." Now, if he hadn't called back, or if he hadn't called back in time for Jimmy Carter to receive the message, then Jimmy Carter would have been woken up in the middle of the night as President of the United States and been told, "Sir, the Soviets are attacking us. What do we do?"
Yeah.
Norwegian scientists had decided to do some sort of test, shoot out a flare to test something in their atmosphere. And they'd warned publicly that this was going to happen, just some random flare. Boris Yeltsin, the president of Russia, it's not the
1990s.
Soviet Union, it's now Russia, he's informed by his radar specialist that, sir, there is a missile heading towards us. And it's the only time in human history that a president of a nation has started the process of retaliation. He opened the nuclear briefcase, is what they call it, which is basically like codes that they then use to authorize that there will be a nuclear strike. Thinking, this is it, here we go. Which is even crazier, considering at this point the Soviet Union's gone. So in theory, Russia's enemies are no more. But again, this kind of plays back to that Russian mindset of feeling like everyone's against you. And then someone's like, no, it's okay. This flare is this whatever this is going off into the sea.
It's the Norwegians.
It's fine.
The Norwegians don't want to hurt anyone. They got a problem with trolls.
The Soviets like, what the fuck was that? How that happened? And the Norwegians like, we told you. We literally said a month ago. And so these are all separate examples, right? That's one example of human error. That's one example of someone just being a bit twitch-ho because no one's told them from down below that there's some scientific thing happening elsewhere. There's one where the computer system's screwed up. There's one where a bear has attacked a facility and they thought that it was, there's all these different examples of all this stuff. And it's just one extra thing goes wrong and that's it. And suddenly the world's changed forever. And we change our clocks and now we're to one, what would it be? AB after bomb. One AB.
It's kind of poignant because like these events that happened in like 1990s and 1970s and 50s, but like looking at the Ukrainian war right now and seeing a nuclear power plant like Zaporizhia on fire, which is the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe, it kind of brings those fears to life a little bit because you think, oh God, there's literally missiles going off around this power plant. If it does blow up, there's going to be nuclear fallout drifting as far as London. And these seem so like out of the blue, but truly they probably still happen today. They'll probably be declassified in like 20 years' time about how close we probably are.
Absolutely.
It's like you say, like everything's classified until like 50 years later. It's like we're only finding out about the CIA trying to overthrow governments like 10 years ago.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because that's something I had written down and forgotten about, is that I said over 20 times that we've had close calls like this. That's the ones we know of. Yeah. Remember that this story
we were fucking close. Well,
several times.
Closer than the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Probably.
I bet, yeah.
There will be so many more we are not aware of. It was only 20 years ago we found out about the Russian submarine one, which is now infamous for how close we came with that one officer saying no. My final question to you, in a world where this does happen, in this hypothetical situation, it would take hundreds of years to get back to where we were.
Avocados.
In that world, do the new civilization, the new collective of people, decide to build nukes?
Ooh. No.
Why?
I think it depends. You're saying it's one civilization that are ruling over the entirety of what's left of the earth. There are going to be some fucking crazy organizations left over that eat people, want to blow up everything again, and worship atom bombs. We played Fallout. We know people worship the atom bombs, but surely common sense would prevail when they see how fucked up the world is, and they're like, it's pretty fucked up now. It probably could get worse if we go again. I would say no.
Well, that's the optimistic view. In my opinion, I disagree. Because I think it's within human nature to find an enemy everywhere, to fear danger, to fear your life and fear the people around you are going to be hurt. I'm not saying that I think warfare is a fundamental part of human society, but I do think the concept of conflict is. And I do think that if a new society was reborn, you would hope that they would clearly pray that nothing like that would ever happen again. Never again. Never forget. Hundreds of years go by. Generations forget. I could see it happening again. And that's what's so scary about the concept of nuclear weaponry. And that's why, stuff like Oppenheimer is so dramatic to watch, because you understand why they feel so dramatic about it, because this could literally be the end forever. And that's why I felt so inclined to do the Cuban Missile Crisis, because it's just such a powerful example of how fleeting life is. It could go like that. We could be talking and finish this podcast. We get, outside, we start heading home, and suddenly we just see a nuclear blast from one point. That could just happen.
Let's hope not.
That could happen at any point.
That's why I watch Barbie.
Yeah, I know, you're a big Barbie fan. Biggest Barbie fan EU. Zack. Zack for the traitors. But anyway, that is it for my podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. It took a lot of research.
Our podcast.
Yeah, sorry, what I meant, you're right, our podcast. What I meant is my research, because this topic, I picked this topic, and it was exhausting to read about and learn about.
Go have a beer.
Because
enjoy a little sleep.
I know. So I feel like I do need to sleep after that. Yeah, just say thank you for chiming along and chatting away. The next one, you're going to be in charge.
Yeah, so next time, thank you for joining us today. Next time we'll be talking about the Vikings, because I fucking love the series. I love Ragnar Lothbrok. I love Rollo. I love Floki. God, their hair, their looks, their muscly aggression. I love it all.
Something different. I'm just happy to get out of the 20th century. Let's do it.
All right, see you later.
See you later. Bye-bye.